So Howard Shore was the composer of all of the movies out of Middle-earth, so the Lord of the Rings trilogy and the Hobbit trilogy. And he used this concept in music called leitmotif. It's really not important. But there's this one theme, right, that is used to represent the Fellowship of the Ring, right? And if you haven't seen if you haven't seen the movies, the Fellowship is like the group of guys that get together and they're like, we will give our lives to destroy this uber evil ring once and for all, okay? And so there's this one part where you see the Fellowship in action for the first time, and the theme plays full brass really strong to represent like, hey, this is it, right? The Fellowship of the Ring is here. And so I wanted to play that theme for you so you could hear it. And then I'm going to play another version of that theme after the Fellowship is broken and Boromir, one of the members, has died, okay? So here's that first little clip, okay? That right there. That's it. That's the theme. But that's it. That's the theme. Ba, ba, ba-da-da. You know, pretty cool, right? We all love it. And let's see. Let me fast forward here. So kind of keep that in your mind. And then, let me get to this. A better preacher would have been prepared. You're all like, amen and amen. Okay, about right here, you'll hear the version of that theme, right? But it's sad, okay? So did you hear that, right? So what Howard Shore brilliantly does, and I'm a nerd about all things that I'm into, so music is one of them, is he takes the same melodic notes and tones and just makes them feel different, right? And so at one point we know, like, it makes me want to stand up and just be like, yes, let's go punch somebody in the face, you know? Like, take that, Dark Lord. And then the next one you like want to cry because one of the founding members of the Fellowship is dead, right? And so it takes these themes. Howard Shore took a theme and then used it later on in the movie to help you emotionally connect with what was going on. Does that make sense? Yeah. All right? If you're with me, say right on. Right on. Okay. In the same way, the Bible does this, okay? I just wanted to really bring that home because that is, for me, been the most fruitful way for me to read the Bible, right? Because the whole thing behind this Genesis class is to help y'all understand and maybe gain some tools on how to read the Bible better, right? Yeah? So I want that to be like the main thing that you take away from this class is to look for these themes and patterns that repeat in the biblical narrative, okay? All right, and so last week we got through verse 5, right? That was awesome. Spent all that time, we got to verse 5. I'm so excited, okay? I legit thought maybe we'd get to verse 3, but here we are, right? How many of y'all did your homework? How many of y'all read Genesis chapter 1? Okay. Yeah, I'm depressed. Right on. If you didn't do it, just know that I'm casting dispersions upon you. Anyway, so we're going to pick up right where we left off. We're going to start in Genesis 1, chapter 1, verse 6. You wish we were in chapter 6. Actually, that one's going to be a fun one. When we get to it, guys, that's going to be nuts. Because that's the one everybody reads and they're like, what? Nephilim? Anyway, spoilers. So here we are, right? We've already gotten through day 1. God has created light and dark, day, night. He's named them, right? And we've already seen this really cool thing that John does, and he's like, in John, in the beginning of his gospel, he ties Jesus as the Word of God into the creation narrative of Genesis 1:1. It's just amazing, If you weren't here last week, ask somebody about it. But here we go. It says, "Then God said, 'Let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters.' God made the expanse and separated the waters which were below the expanse from the waters which were above the expanse. And it was so. God called the expanse heaven, and there was evening and there was morning, a second day." So we have to remember, right, at this point in time, what does the earth look like? Chaotic waters, right? It's tohu vavohu, and God's Spirit is hovering over the surface of the deep, and these waters are it's meant to evoke, like, think of like a dark, churning sea, right? And that's what you're supposed to kind of think of, right? And so God creates this space where life can exist now, right? Because life can't exist in that chaos, nasty ocean. Does that make sense? Yeah, that primeval water, right? And so God is creating a space. So he separates waters above from waters below, okay? Do you remember last week how we talked about our conceptualization of the atom? Do y'all remember that? And how the way we conceive of the atom isn't exactly how it is, right? Actually, like, electrons themselves are both wave and particle, and it's really hard for us to even define what they are. But in our minds, they're like the little baseballs that are circling the beach ball, right? Right? So this is very much in the same vein. When the ancients looked up at the sky, they saw something that was big and blue. What's the other big and blue thing they can think of? The sea. So why wouldn't those two things be the same? Does that make sense? So in their mind, they see the skies above as a firmament or expanse, depending on your translation. That word's kind of tricky to translate. Some Bible scholars have used the word vault, right? So he created a space, and there's something firm up there that holds those waters at bay, okay? And so what that does is it means that by God's power, by God's strength, and God's creativity, he holds the state of tohu vavohu at bay. Does that make sense? So he made it possible for man to live, for life to exist, by holding the chaos waters at bay, both below and above. Y'all tracking? Okay. That's the big thing to really grab from here, okay? And so we'll move on to the next verse, right? Then God said, "Let the waters below the heavens be gathered into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the gathering of the waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees on the earth, bearing fruit after their kind with seed in them." And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed after their kind, and trees bearing fruit with seed in them after their kind. And God saw that it was good. There was evening and there was morning, a third day. Okay? First thing to note here is that we get a double creation day, right? Day 3 is like bonus creation. Not only do we get dry land, but we also get plants and vegetation. That's pretty cool, right? But also buried in this is this idea of self-reproduction, right? On day 3, you have not only double creation, but you have mediate creation, where creation begins to create. Notice how God asked the land, told the land, spoke to the land to bring forth vegetation. God did not bring it forth himself. He commanded that the land do it. And on top of that, that vegetation is capable of self-reproduction. Right? Yeah. So we have this idea of a seed reproducing its kind. Yeah? You tracking? Yeah. Okay. These are all establishing themes that are going to come back later, okay? Also, this is one of my favorite motifs to come out of the entire Bible. This idea of life coming out of chaotic waters. Did y'all catch that? How land and life came out of the chaos waters. Y'all tracking? Okay. Thank you. God bless all of you. Think about this, okay? We will see this theme reappear over and over and over. In Genesis chapter 6, Noah and his family are preserved out of the chaos waters. Life comes out of chaos waters, right? The Red Sea. The Israelites come out of the chaos of slavery through the waters, out of the Red Sea into God's promised land. Do you see that one? Naaman, right? That the Syrian general. He goes to Elisha and he has leprosy in his body. And Elisha says, go dunk yourself 7 times in the Jordan, right? And his body is in chaos. His body is wild and waste. And he comes out of the Jordan River and his body is healed, right? We have order in life coming out of chaos through the waters again, right? The Israelites cross the Jordan, right? They're in a state of semi-rebellion. They're not listening to God, but they make a new commitment to God, right? Right at the end of Deuteronomy, and Joshua leads them through the Jordan into the promised land. So they go from the wilderness into their promised land through what? Water. Okay? Is that not amazing? Yeah. Now, I want you to think about baptism. What's the symbol that we use of our commitment to Jesus? You go into the waters of baptism with a chaotic, wild, and wasteful life, and you come out of it symbolizing your resurrection in Jesus into new life. Holy smokes, guys! Is that not beautiful? Do you see how the theme starts, just like Howard Shore had the theme in Lord of the Rings playing, and it pops up again and again and again throughout the Bible. So now, when you're reading the Bible in your devotional time, and you see water, what do you need to preload into your mind? What's the theme that should be playing? Regeneration, renewal of life, recreation, new creation. Y'all tracking? Yeah. If you're with me, say right on. Right on. God bless you. That's so good. All right. Oh, gosh. Okay. I don't even know where we are. I keep telling myself I'm going to look over the slides so I know them better, but I keep forgetting. So y'all just pray for Chase. He's trying to keep up with me. He doesn't even know what's going on. Anyway, okay. Let's keep going, all right? So here we are on beginning day 4, okay? Then God said, let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. And let them be for lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth. And it was so. God made the 2 great lights, the greater light to govern the day, and the lesser light to govern the night. He made the stars also. God placed them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, and to govern the day and the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. There was evening and there was morning, a 4th day. That's pretty cool, right? A lot of people have read this, and they've pointed out that we had light and dark, night and day, before we had sun and moon. Right? That's pretty interesting. And I think the way to think about this, right, and we'll expound on this once we finish the creation narrative, is you really have to key in on the phrase that God speaks here when he says he gave those lights to govern the night and govern the day. Right? So we have this realm of light and dark, night and day, right, that we want to think of in terms of our kind of rational materialist mind as night and day and light and photons. But really what it's about is passage of time. Okay? And then on the 4th day, we have the creation of the things that govern the passage of time. Does that make sense? So it's almost like we have a realm on day 1, and then parallel to it on day 4, we have the ruler of the realm. Y'all tracking? Realm, ruler, okay? And it's interesting here also to note that the author of Genesis chapter 1, of this creation narrative, does not use the Hebrew words for sun and moon. He calls them the greater light and the lesser light. And he did that on purpose because he didn't want those heavenly bodies being linked to some of the gods of the pagan cultures around them. You see what I'm saying? He didn't want somebody to look up at the sun and think Ra, the sun god of Egypt. Right? He didn't want somebody to look up at the moon and think Diana, the goddess of the moon, the Greek goddess of the moon. Does that make sense? He wanted you to be sure to know that those things that other people worship are created things. You see that? So the sun, moon, and stars are less about light or photosynthesis or any of those things, and they are more about the governing of the passage of time. How do I know that it's day? The sun's up. How do I know that it's night? The moon's up. See what I'm saying? How do I know that it's been a month? Well, the moon has completed a cycle. Right? Y'all know that's where we get the word month from in English? It's a month, you know? How do I know that it's winter? Well, Orion, the constellation's high in the sky. Right? So it's about the governing of the times and seasons. Right? Okay. All of this is going to come together really nice at the end, I hope. We'll see. Then God said, "Let the waters teem with swarms of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth in the open expanse of the heavens." God created the great sea monsters and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarmed after their kind, and every winged bird after its kind. And God saw that it was good. God blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let birds multiply on the earth." There was evening and there was morning, a 5th day. Okay, so what do we see created on the 5th day? Birds and fish, yeah. Where do those birds and fish live? In the waters, right? So we have the realm of the waters above and the waters below created on the 2nd day that links to the birds and fish. Y'all catch that? So again, we have this pattern of realm and then rulers. Right? Realms and then who occupies that realm. Y'all tracking? Okay. And then the really notable part here is that we have the first instance of God blessing something. Okay? And I don't want to step on anybody's toes, but I might. We have a kind of odd idea of what blessing is nowadays, right? There's some pretty dumb ideas that have syncretized itself to Christianity, right? What is the first blessing here? To be fruitful and multiply. That's the first blessing. That's it. It's not a new Bentley, right? It's not getting that jet in the air for that preacher that already has like 4 of them. Kenneth, sorry, I had something in my throat. Right? The blessing is being fruitful and multiplying. Right? And multiplying in the realms in which you rule. You see that? He doesn't tell the fish to be fruitful and multiply in the sky. He tells them to be fruitful and multiply in the seas. He doesn't tell the birds to multiply in the water, except for the rebellious penguins. But you see what I'm saying? Right? So, when we see God blessing something, we have to, there's a biblical interpretation law called the law of first mention, right? That's why I'm trying to get y'all to think in themes and motifs, okay? And so the first mention helps inform later mentions. Does that make sense? So what can we learn about blessing later on in the Bible? It has more to do with multiplying, right? And less to do about enriching. Y'all tracking? Yeah. If you're with me, say right on. Right on. All right. Hey, we're making some headway here. We might finish this chapter. All right. Do y'all have any questions so far?
Can you repeat what you just said about blessing?
Blessing has less to do with like enriching you and more to do with multiplying and being fruitful. Right? Okay. Okay. Verse 24. Then God said, "Let the earth bring forth living creatures after their kind, cattle and creeping things and beasts of the earth after their kind." And it was so. Y'all catch that? Let the earth, an instance of immediate creation, okay? God made the beasts of the earth after their kind, and the cattle after their kind, and everything that creeps on the ground after its kind. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image." What a cool statement, huh? "Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the sky, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." Okay, so I want to point this out to you. We have another double creation day. Did y'all see that? What did we create? Animals and people. Okay? Do you remember the double creation day that we had? Previously was day 3. So in your mind, you need to link 1 and 4, 2 and 5, 3 and 6. Right? You have realm and then you have ruler in each of those. Okay? Let me see here. Okay, this chart is in your notes, and it's going to really help pull everything together. I don't know how well y'all can see this in the back. But, yeah, it's great, huh? Perfect. If we use the projector, it'd be even worse, so don't worry. Okay, so if you break down the verbal structure of the creation narratives in days 1 through 6, this is what you have, right? Basically, if you just look at the sentence structure, you have, "And God said," right? And it was so, and God saw that it was good, and then it was evening and it was morning, right? And that's basically the basic pattern of creation, okay? Now, what you may have noticed is that these days are corresponding to each other, okay? So if you look at the pattern of day 1 and day 4, you'll see that those statements line up. Does that make sense? Y'all tracking? And then day 2 and day 5 line up, except they both exclude one of those statements at one point. Does that make sense? Okay. And then day 3 is a double creation day on both accounts. You see how that lines up? Yeah. Okay. And then you can see here, like the realm and ruler structure that pops out when you start lining these days up with one another. Isn't that cool? Yeah. I think that's really cool. So, day 3 and day 6 are unique in that they are days where autonomous reproduction is possible. These are the days when creation with creative capacity is made. You see that? That gets me really, really excited, right? And when the Bible is starting to show you parallels, that's when you need to start paying attention, because you're going to really start to pull things out of it when you spend time thinking about it. Okay? And I'll show you all this in a moment. But before we kind of, this is like a big arrow pointing in a direction, and we'll conclude it in a second. Before we do that, I want to stop and just spend a little bit of time talking about verses 26 through 30. Okay? It says, "Then God said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the sky, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them." Okay. In verse 27, do y'all remember that structure we talked about, the chiasmus? Yeah. In verse 27, we have a chiastic structure. Okay? We have the two parallel statements. God created man in his own image. And then the bottom statement, male and female, he created them. And in chiasmus, the most important one is the middle statement, right? So what's that middle statement? In the image of God, he created them. That's right. Okay? I want you to stop and think about this for a minute. Okay? There's this idea of if an infinite being, right? If an infinite being expresses himself in a finite manner, it's going to be different every time. Y'all tracking with me? An infinite being expresses himself finitely, it's going to be different every time. So what that means is that your neighbor, that person that works across the office from you that just won't stop slurping their coffee, right? Whoever it may be, right, is a unique expression of God's character. Do you see that? Like, Chase Cathy is awesome, and I love this man, right? He's one of my brothers. And he is also the only chance I'll ever get to see God's character expressed this way in all of human history. Do you understand what that means? Right? So, when Jesus tells us to love one another, it is wisdom to do so. Not because he says so, but because that person next to you has infinite value, because they are completely and totally unique. When Jesus tells us to be unified in a body of Christ, it is because we all collectively put together express God's character more accurately. Does that make sense? When we close our heart off to someone else, when in anger or bitterness we push people away from us, we are robbing ourselves of something that is of infinite value. Do you understand that? It is an absolute foolish decision. It's like if someone offered you a Rembrandt painting and you said no, right? That's completely unique. There's no way you can put a price on it. And that is true for humanity, all of humanity. So where does Christianity, where do we get the basis of the value of human life? From verse 27 right here in Genesis. All 56 million babies that have been aborted were created in the image of God. You know, I also have a suspicion that on Judgment Day, there's going to be some people that rise up and say, God, I didn't believe in you because you didn't cure cancer. And he'll say, I did. I sent you the cure for cancer, but you aborted it. This is the sanctity of life. This is why we must love one another. This is why we absorb pain and hurt from other people, because there's something there that is so incredibly beautiful and valuable. And sure, it may be buried under muck and in sin and filthiness, but so were you. But somebody loved you through it. And they slowly pulled off the weeds of sin, washed you off, and then you got baptized, right? And you came out of the chaos. And then boom, here you are, the shining image of Jesus. Right? When my wife was pregnant with our first child, Finnegan, my daughter, if you know her, she's just like the most kind and gentle, amazing little spirit ever. And I'm like so bitter and cynical, I don't understand how that happened, right? It's amazing. Like, I'm a cup of bitter black coffee and she's a lollipop. Anyway, but I remember just panicking, right? We weren't like ready, you know? And I was still in school and I'm like, this is really like, oh my gosh, we're having a kid? Okay. And I remember I was sitting in my office and I'm praying and I'm just like, Lord, help. Like, what are you doing? You're giving me a kid. I can barely put my pants on right in the morning, you know? And he just stopped me and he was like, son, you don't know what a gift I am giving you. There has never been anyone in the history of the world like your daughter, and there will never be anyone like her ever again. And that's what it means to be created in the image of God. Okay? When it says that God created man in this passage, the verb is bara, right? And it is the same word that is used for potters, right? It implies that the use of hands has happened, right? So like maybe a better word would be molded. Does that make sense? So before we have God speaking to the light and the dark, speaking to the waters, speaking to the land and the seas. But here in this moment, we have God kneeling on the earth and gathering the ground in his hands and forming humanity himself. Not by his words, but by his hands. Right? And just through this word, we can see that we are the simple image. We, as humanity, not only are the image bearers of God, but we are also the place where God touches the earth. We are the place where the spiritual interacts with the dirt. We're not just some meat machine. Right? Are we having church yet? Like, this is good, right? Okay. I'm sorry if I'm being too heavy, but maybe I shouldn't have brought up abortion, but I had a bone to pick. It's okay. It's only like a Holocaust every year. Tell me I'm wrong. It's going on YouTube. It's fine. This won't come back to me. I'm not going to run for office or anything. Told the truth. What? The next word I kind of want to zone in on is the word for image here. Okay? The word for image in Hebrew is the word tselem, okay? So Hebrew has a fun letter, right? Actually, Czech has it too, but it's like a T-S, tse, right? And this word is T-S-E-L-E-M, tselem. I don't know if it's on here or not. Oh, where are we at? Hey, there it is. There it is, all right, tselem. See that? Okay. So it's curious to me that they translate it here as image, but just about everywhere else that it's used, it's translated as idol. Okay? So when you read the Old Testament and you see like, hey, they had the idol of this god or whatever, right? The word is the same word as image in Genesis chapter 1. Okay? So we're going to do a little thought experiment here because I really want to drive home this concept that is opened up in verse 27, okay? So imagine you're just like a run-of-the-mill pagan at this time, right? You worship Dagon, the fish god of the Philistines or whatever. you know, and you want to curry favor with the gods, okay? The way that you would curry favor with the gods is you would go and leave an offering at the foot of the idol, right? You'd go to the image of that god in the temple, and you would lay your offering down at the foot, right? Like, you could like go on YouTube and just look at like Hindu worship ceremonies. You'll see this stuff, okay? But like a bread offering or meat sacrifice or burnt offering or like a cup of milk. I don't know if it's a cat god, I guess, you know, whatever. But to curry favor, you would leave an offering at the foot of the idol, okay? Now imagine you're run-of-the-mill pagan and then you convert to Judaism. You're like, hey, this Yahweh guy sounds like the right God. I'll go with him, okay? And then you're like, how do I get Yahweh to favor me? Like, how do I curry Yahweh's favor? Where is the image of Yahweh that I take my offering to? Where? Well, there isn't one. Not in the temple, at least. But then all you have to do is go next door. See the poor person at the end of your street. See that homeless guy at the corner that just needs a couple bucks. Right? So, where do we take our offerings to give to our God? To His image. Y'all tracking? Yeah. Okay? In Matthew 25, Jesus is speaking to the sheep and the goats. And it says, "Then the king will say to those on his right, 'Come, you who are blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was sick. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me.' Then the righteous will answer him, 'Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? And when did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or naked and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and come to you?' The king will answer and say to them, 'Truly I say to you, to the extent that you did it to one of these brothers of mine, even to the least of them, you did it to me.'" So this is like the underpinning of all the social laws of the Old Testament and all the social laws that Jesus presents to us in His new kingdom of heaven. You see that? So, if you want to do something for Jesus, you love your fellow man. You don't withhold. You give. Yeah? And all of that is just thinking and contemplating, what does it mean to be created in God's image? I forgot to mention earlier, verse 27 is actually a poem. It's like the first little poem in the Bible. So young, make a note of that. And that's when you see it structured as a poem, the chiastic structure really stands out, and you can bring all that out. It's also notable that the terms here for humanity are the general terms, not like man. Does that make sense? It's humanity, it's mankind. Okay? And that's implying that all men and women are created in God's image. Okay? Some people have taken, done bad tourist jobs and kind of taken things and implied that half of the population of the earth is somehow lesser. I think C.S. Lewis sums it up really, really succinctly. He says, "It is a serious thing to live in a society of possible gods and goddesses, to remember that the dullest and most uninteresting person you talk to may one day be a creature which, if you saw it now, you would be strongly tempted to worship, or else a horror and a corruption such as you now meet, if at all, only in a nightmare. All day long we are, in some degree, helping each other to one or other of these destinations." So C.S. Lewis is saying that we are either pushing each other towards heaven or towards hell with each interaction. Right? I hope I'm going to be able to sleep tonight because I'm having coffee really late. And I'm old now. Okay. Let's see, what's next? Oh, the C.S. Lewis quote. What's up there? Okay, here we go. Praise God. Good job, buddy. Verse 28. God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and rule over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the sky, and over every living thing that moves on the earth." Then God said, "Behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the surface of all the earth, and every tree which has fruit yielding seed. It shall be food for you. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the sky, and to everything that moves on the earth which has life, I have given every green plant for food." And it was so. God saw all that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day. Right? Hey, we just finished the 6 days. Look at that. Man, we're good. Okay, we're going really well. So I want to point out a moment of bad tourism. Y'all ready? Okay. So we're going to start at this passage in Genesis and end up at breakfast cereals. Okay. So there was this guy named W.K. Kellogg, right? And he was reading his Bible one day, and he was like, "How did Adam live 935 years? I would like to live a long time too." And so he started reading through the book of Genesis, and he noticed in this passage that Adam and Eve were only given plants to eat, right? So he began to formulate in his mind this concept of a plant-based diet, okay? Now, the biggest hiccup to him was at the time breakfast, okay? At that time, breakfast was generally ham and eggs and bacon, which sounds fantastic to me. I don't know why you'd mess with that, but whatever, right? So what he does is W.K. Kellogg rounds up a bunch of investors, right? And he creates this health spa, right, where you're on a vegetarian diet. And one of the hallmarks is he takes corn, creates a meal out of it, then bakes it into little flakes. And then you put those flakes in milk, and you eat them for breakfast, right? So W.K. Kellogg founded the Battle Creek Toasted Cornflake Company, which we now know as Kellogg's. You don't get Tony the Tiger without somebody misreading Genesis. Right? Ironically, one of the first attendants to his health spa where he debuted these cornflakes was a guy named C.W. Post, who spied on the cornflake machine and then ran off and founded his own company, Post Cereals, which we now know as General Foods. Right? We wouldn't have Fruit Loops if it weren't for a misreading of Genesis chapter 1. Isn't that amazing? Yeah. Like some of the dumb things you can get to when you're a bad tourist, right? Mr. Kellogg was definitely walking around Paris with a cowboy hat on, asking for a Big Mac, you know? That's like my favorite little stupid nugget that I found while I was researching this. But so a couple things that we need to pull out of this passage besides cornflakes. And well, actually, next time you walk down the cereal aisle, I want you to have in your mind, I want you to think, that's a bad way to read the Bible, okay? Like every time you look at cereal, I want you to think of that, okay? Oh, look, it's Lucky Charms. Oh, I got to read my Bible better, you know? Anyway, I hope that's like seared in there. But we need to pull out a couple more things. One is that God gave us another blessing, right? What was this blessing? Be fruitful and multiply. Same thing as the last time, okay? And be fruitful and multiply where? In the realms where they ruled. You see that? They're given rulership over everything, okay? And that leads us to the next thing. Is it innate in the image of God is this idea of rulership. That humanity is not just created in his image, but we're also created in his similar purpose. Does that make sense? That we were actually created to be kings of the earth, to rule over the earth. Does that cook anybody else's noodle? So if you tie together God's charge, where he says, behold, I have given you, and states everything he's given us to do, if you tie the charge with his blessing, then you come to this conclusion that our sacred mission is to spread God's order and rule over all the earth. See that? Our sacred mission is to spread God's order and rule over all the earth. Yeah? Okay, and what time is it? A couple more minutes. We'll finish the creation narrative. Yeah? Sounds good? Okay. So, because whoever divided up the Bible was not paying attention at the beginning, the creation narrative, day 7 is in like chapter 2, and it really doesn't need to be. Like, chapter 2 needs to start at like 2:4. So this creation narrative kind of falls over into the next chapter, which is really frustrating for me because I just want the lines to be drawn properly, right? But it says, thus the heavens and the earth were completed, and all their hosts. By the 7th day God completed his work which he had done, and he rested on the 7th day from all his work which he had done. Then God blessed the 7th day and sanctified it, because in it he rested from all his work which he had created and made. So here we have the first Sabbath, right? We see that God's resting, and the word in the word in verse 3 for rested is nuach, which is where Noah gets his name from. Interesting, but anyway. So that's for later. When we get to chapter 6, it'll tie in, don't worry. But here we have the first Sabbath. We have God resting from his labors, right? Did God need rest? No. No. Do we need rest? Yes. Yeah, we do. So he was showing us how to live, right? Isn't that amazing? We have a God that doesn't just command us to do things, but he shows us how to do it, right? And I think it's interesting that it's centuries later before God even explains what the Sabbath is, right? So what we can conclude here is that God values obedience over knowledge, right? He wants you to obey him even if you might not understand him. Yeah? So, what are some of the, I know there's a lot of people in this room and nobody ever wants to talk in a larger group, and honestly, when I structured this thing, I thought like 12 people would show up. So, sorry. What are some of the reoccurring themes that we've seen so far in chapter 1? Yeah, be fruitful and multiply, the blessing of God. Water. Yeah, the chaos water. Yeah. Say it again. The realms and rulers. Yep, that's a big one. Okay, that's all we saw. All right, right on. Okay, so God uses the word here in when it says that he ceased and stopped from his work. The word is Shabbat, right? The Hebrew word is Shabbat. And it's the word that we get Sabbath from, right? And I'm going to get really nerdy here because it'll help us down the road, right? And I'm really sorry, just don't fall asleep on me, okay? But we have to know just a little bit about how the Hebrew language works, okay? The Hebrew language is radically different from English. It's in a completely different linguistic family. But the way it works is you'll have like a base of consonants, okay? And then they don't have proper vowels. They have vowel markers, Does that make sense? So you'll write the consonants and put like dots here or dashes there above or below that indicate what the vowels are, okay? And then all of the words that are built out of that consonantal root will all be related to each other, okay? So the word Sabbath, Shabbat, right? And then the word for the Hebrew word for seven, which I didn't write down and I can't remember right now, come from the same consonantal root, right? And so here, when it talks about the seventh day being the Sabbath, they're doing a little wordplay, okay? Also is like the idea of completion. That's why the number 7 comes up so much in the Bible, is because of the way that the word is constructed. Does that make sense, or is that too out there? Like Arabic is similar. Arabic is in the same linguistic family as Hebrew. And so Arabic has like the SLM consonantal root, right? You have salam, which means peace. You have Islam, which is a religion of peace. And you have Muslim, right? SLM, Muslim, which means submitted one. And all that has the same consonantal root and same kind of meaning family. Y'all tracking? Yeah, okay. So Hebrew is the same way. And so like Sabbath, 7, completion, and perfection all have the same root, okay? So there's 7 days of creation, right? And this 7 thing comes up a lot in this first chapter, and we're going to go through it real quick, okay? So we have 7 days of creation. We have 7 times God says something is good, and that word in Hebrew is tov, T-O-V, if you want to write it down, tov. And then in day 6 he says tov, tov, because in Hebrew you repeat it. Tov, tov means very good, right? This is kind of fun. In verse 1, there are 7 words in Hebrew. In verse 2, there are 14 Hebrew words. And then in the passage talking about the 7th day, there are 21 Hebrew words. Isn't that pretty cool? Right? And so what the author is trying to do is to get you to see like the completion in wholeness that happens within creation. Creation is perfect and complete. Y'all tracking? Yeah. Okay. Lastly, and then we'll probably end it there so that y'all can discuss in your small groups or we can answer questions or whatever. But I want to give you this really out there and crazy 1,000-foot view, okay? You ever go tour a place and then actually get to do like a plane ride or a helicopter ride or whatever? Really cool, and you get a perspective that you don't usually get, right? Well, I want to see. It's stuck. Okay. I want to show you, and visually I think it'd be helpful to see the parallel structure, okay? Now, Genesis chapter 1 could totally be the creation narrative, just plain reading, this is how the world was made, okay? And if you take that view, you might be asking yourself, like, was it a literal day? Was it a metaphorical day? How long were these time periods, right? And, you know, are we talking instantaneous creation? Are we talking like, you know, was it, you know, Isaiah says a day is like 1,000 years to the Lord, 1,000 years is like a day. Is that what's going on here? You can get in discussions and try and dissect the meaning of the Hebrew word that we translate as day, because some people say it can be translated as era and all this stuff, right? But I'm going to, there's a couple times I'm going to do this, but I'm going to kind of tip my hand here as to what I believe. And I'm trying to present everything really balanced, okay? But the Hebrew scholar John Walton is the first person I read that showed me this. And it's called the Cosmic Temple Creation Story, okay? Now, first, what you have to know is a little bit of ancient Near East temple ceremony, which sounds really riveting, doesn't it? So essentially what would happen, right, is let's say the Babylonians, and this comes, you can really see this in the Babylonian creation narrative called the Enuma Elish. And if you spent some time on the internet, you'll see like those edgelord 13-year-old atheists bring it up in comment sections and stuff. But the Enuma Elish is the creation/heroic epic of the Babylonian god Marduk. Marduk like kills the chaotic water monster Tiamat and cuts her in half, and her body becomes the sky and the land. It's all that stuff, right? But it's based around 7 speeches or rituals that each corresponded to a facet of the construction or function of the temple of Marduk. Okay? So what that means, right, is the priest comes out and he's like, hey, we're going to make a temple to Marduk. He needs a new temple, everybody, right? And the first day, he's going to get up there and he's going to say, this is the creation schedule, right? We're going to lay the foundations on this day, and these are the ceremonial schedules that we're going to have in place, right? And the next time he comes out, he'll read the story, and then it'll be like, now we're going to lay the foundation of the temple, and then we're going to put the roof on the temple, right? And then the next day, he'll come out and he'll read a story, and then he's like, we're going to put the walls in, we're going to fill the walls in, and we're going to start decorating the interior, right? And then the next day he's going to come, and he's going to go, hey, these are the priests that are in charge of the temple. Do you see what's happening? He's realm and then ruler, right? Y'all tracking with me? If you're with me, say right on. Okay. And then on the last day, what they will do to like make the temple official, to show like, hey, the God is resting in this temple now, right? The presence of our God Marduk is in this temple now, is they will bring in the idol of Marduk and put it in the temple. Y'all see where this is going, right? Yeah. And then it says, then they're like, Marduk is here. Here is his image. What I think Genesis chapter 1 is not necessarily trying to give you some roadmap to how creation happened, but it's more about the pot of boiling water is for a cup of tea, right? It's the why of creation. So I think this was written, and this is me just really playing my hand, and I apologize for being this forward with it, but I think it was written as a rebuke to all of the ancient Near East cultures around them. Your God has that cute little temple. Guess what my God's temple is? And guess who his idol is? I represent my God's presence in his temple, which is this whole universe. You see that? So, and this is really, to me, reinforced. If you look at the narratives of the tabernacle and the first temple and those creation, you will see that there's 7 speeches and 7 phases of construction, right? Just like in Genesis chapter 1, there's 7 days of creation, and we're creating the whole universe. So God is saying, this whole thing is mine. The earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof. Amen? Is that not pretty cool? And I think that works because it just takes all the air out of the other objections. Right? Why is the pot of water boiling? For a cup of tea. Right? So y'all, if you're here with your small groups and stuff, you'll get with them and talk through some of this stuff. And if you have any questions, we can go ahead and take those now if you want. Or not. Talkative group. Y'all are great. All right. Hey, I'll see y'all next week. Yeah? Cool.